Hi, I know that so many of my therapist friends are freaking out about the fact that coronavirus is going around and may impact their ability to see clients that they've been seeing face to face. I've been talking with university counseling centers who are also concerned about this because they're seeing hundreds of clients every week in their counseling center, and some universities are shutting down to stop the spread of the virus, and they're concerned about not being able to provide ongoing care for their regular clients or clients who are in crisis. So I know that many of you are trying to make very quick decisions about whether or not to provide telehealth. That is therapy provided by synchronous, meaning at the same time, video connection. So if you're thinking about that, I just wanted to make a quick and easy video to walk you through what you'll need to have in place to set that up so that it doesn't have to feel so scary, and also so that you're not out there just kind of throwing things together willy-nilly. Okay, so let's get started. Yes, you do need to make sure that you have telehealth covered in your informed consent. And just like any informed consent, you're going to want to cover risks and benefits of telehealth, just like you would cover risks and benefits of therapy in general. If you want a shortcut to what needs to be in your informed consent related to telehealth, you can go to my website, amberlyda.com. It's AMBERLYDA.com. And under my products section, you'll see my informed consent. You don't need to buy the informed consent. There's a free outline on that page for you so that you can look for exactly what needs to be in there. Okay, so number one, you will want to have paperwork in place, and the informed consent that you previously had with your client needs to be updated to include some telehealth specific features. So again, just check out that piece of my website to see an outline of what needs to be there. Most states and most professional bodies like the American Psychological Association or the National Association of Social Workers, most don't have out guidance statements or ethical statements about what needs to be in your informed consent related to telehealth specifically, but some of them do. So it is worth Googling. So step two, it's worth Googling your professional body and ethics, put those two words together and get that statement, print it out, read through it to look for tech related issues. So whether it be telehealth or whether it be a social media statement, and make sure that you have added that in to your updated informed consent. And then I also want you to Google the name of your association and guidance statements, because your professional ethics statement only gets updated every few years. And so in between, if something is changing a lot, like the status of telehealth, then they're going to release a guidance statement prior to the next ethics release. So just look up, social work, guidance statement, telehealth. And social work has a beautiful guidance statement about telehealth. So theirs is like, so good. And you can, even if you're from a different profession, grab some of the language from there and put it in your informed consent. So we need to update our informed consent. You want to check with your professional body and their ethics statement or their guidance statement to see if there's anything that needs to be in there that you haven't thought of. And you're also going to want to check with your state board to see if they have any statements about telehealth as it relates to your paperwork. So what I like to do is just print all of the stuff that my state board says that has anything to do with my practice of psychology, and then just scroll through there with a highlighter and look for anything that might relate to my telehealth practice. Highlight that bad boy, and if it's related to paperwork, then I can add that into my paperwork. But there are also going to be some other things in there that relate to your practice of telehealth. So we're going to come back to that in a minute. Also related to kind of the paperwork administrative side is that you want to make sure that your liability insurance will cover you for telehealth. And many of them do now. I use APA Trust and they cover my telehealth practice. So you're just going to want to call your liability provider and ask them if they cover telehealth and if they will add that onto your policy. If they don't stress, because you can just switch to another liability provider and they'll cover your telehealth. But you want to do two things: make sure that they cover it and then add it. And all that looks like, you guys, is printing out the application and adding telehealth onto the bottom and then emailing it back to them. My application turned around in 24 hours. So if you're concerned about like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have time, don't worry. It usually turns around really, really fast. So your informed consent, the outlines on my website, Google for your professional code of ethics, and if there's anything in there that needs to be added, Google for your state licensing body, and if there's anything from there that needs to be added. And then make sure before you go practicing telehealth that you've contacted your liability insurance provider and that they cover telehealth and that you've added it to your liability. Okay, I'm going to pause so that you can breathe. Telehealth is a thing that's happening in all states. So there is no state that's saying you can't practice online. Some states have some particular standards in place. And when I mentioned printing out your state regulations, this is where that becomes important. So get your notes out. We're just going to cover some important stuff here. And I'm going to try to go slowly so that I don't overwhelm you. It's not a lot, but if you're brand new, it can feel a little bit cumbersome. So all states allow telehealth. Some states have specific requirements around whether or not you can practice it. So I want to start first with the most frequently asked question that I get, which is, do I need to be licensed in the state where I am or the state where my client is, if those two things are different? Most states require you to be licensed in the state where your client is, not where they're visiting, not where they're going to college, not where their permanent address is, but where they are currently located at the time of therapy. And this makes logical sense because if you think about, like, if your client goes into crisis, what are you going to do about that? Well, you don't know unless you know the laws of the place where they are. You don't know who to contact or what the involuntary hospitalization procedure would be, or at what points you would need to report suspected child abuse or elderly abuse, because every state is slightly different and their process is slightly different. So that kind of makes intuitive sense to me, that where my client is where I need to be licensed. And that's the case in most states. You'll want to check in your state board licensing material what is true for your state. And if your client happens to be in a different state, what is true for that state. There are a few, not many, I think it's 2 at this point, at the time of this recording, 2 states that require you to be licensed both where your client is and where you are. So they consider therapy taking place in both of those places. That's not normal, but there are a couple states, so you want to check with that. So no matter what, and I imagine in some of your cases, your clients might be going to a different place. So for example, if you're at a university counseling center and the university closes down and your clients go back home with their family and their home is in another state, you're going to be in the position of trying to figure this out. There are states that allow for a certain number of sessions in their state without you having to go through an application process. So it's worth checking that out. I can imagine that the boards are getting a majillion phone calls. So it might serve you to look on the website before you make that phone call, just to try to help control the deluge that they're getting and to increase the likelihood of them being able to respond to questions that can't be answered on the website. So you just want to check and make sure that you're abiding by the laws of where you are and where your client is. So even if your state says, hey, we consider therapy to be where the therapist is, but your client is in another state, you still have to check out the laws of that state too and make sure that you're doing what they say as well. Okay? I know it's not super fun to read the legalese of this stuff, but it is really important. And it's especially worth your time so that you're prepared in case an emergency does go down, that you know who to call and how to facilitate emergency care for one of your clients. And no matter how well we might assess our peeps before they come into our telehealth practice, life changes, situations changes, and you might be dealing with somebody who's in a crisis and you want to be really well prepared for that. Okay, so we've covered the fact that you need an informed consent that addresses telehealth specifically. And one of the pieces of how you address telehealth specifically is making sure that You have stated an emergency crisis response plan. And all I mean by that, so that's not fancy, all I mean by that is that you have looked at the state where the client is and what you need to do in case of an emergency, and you've outlined that in your paperwork, and you've covered when you would break confidentiality according to that state's laws. So again, this sounds like a pain in the butt. It literally will take you 2 hours. Just read through it, add it into your informed consent. And for liability providers that cover telehealth, you almost always get a free lawyer consult. So you can use that to submit your informed consent to them and have them look it over so that you can feel really comfortable with it when you provide it to clients. Okay? So we've covered informed consent. We've covered emergency and crisis stuff. We've covered liability. Remember that, in my opinion, even if you don't think you're a HIPAA covered entity, I think you should function as one, because if you were to ever get in trouble, they're going to be comparing you against what would most therapists do in your situation, and most therapists are HIPAA covered entities. So in that vein, you want your informed consent to reflect that. Again, you can get a shortcut on my website. Is that when you put the things into place that you need to actually deliver video therapy, you want to make sure that those things are super secure and that they are HIPAA compliant. They're HIPAA level secure. So let's look at that. You're going to need video if you're going to be doing video sessions. Skype, FaceTime, not HIPAA compliant. You are going to need software that's specifically listed as HIPAA compliant and that are willing to provide you a documentation called a BAA. A BAA is a business associates agreement, and it is basically a company saying, hey, even though legally we don't have to be HIPAA compliant, we're agreeing to be HIPAA compliant and to carry some of the liability associated with that if we screw up. So we definitely want somebody who's willing to engage in that contract with us. So when we think about video and we think about all the other things that you're going to need, so HIPAA compliant email, HIPAA compliant video, HIPAA compliant way to bill or invoice your clients and to receive payment, a means of keeping records in a HIPAA compliant way, all of those little details, you can think about getting them in one of two ways. You can get them through a package. So somebody's already bundled together all of the things that you need. My favorite package for that is through iTherapy. So it's I'm going to do it in sign language for you, itherapy.com, and they have bundles of all the things that you could need so that you can get it all in one place all together. They've already got the BAAs with everybody, and they can get you set up really quickly. They're a small family-owned business, and their customer service is second to none. I love them. So you can get it bundled, and you can get all the pieces that you need in one place, or you can piecemeal it together. And when somebody wants to piecemeal together, then they're in one of two camps. There's somebody who wants a lot of control over the particular software that they're going to use, or they want to get the best deal possible and spend the least amount of money. So if you're in a rush and you don't have a whole lot of change to be spending on this, then I'm going to recommend that you piecemeal it, but know that that's going to be more effort for you to find the software that you want. I am going to make a couple of recommendations though. So for a HIPAA compliant video software, you can get a program called Doxy.me for free. It's HIPAA compliant video. And my experience with Doxy is that depending on where you are and where your client is, it can be a perfect video connection or it cannot be. The most foolproof video that I have used is through Zoom. And remember that you can get some of these pieces of software in versions that are HIPAA compliant and are not. So you want to make sure that you're getting the HIPAA compliant one, and the way that you confirm that is that they give you a BAA with it. So all that is a piece of paper. It's already written. You're not having to create anything. Just say, I need the BAA, thank you. And they will send it to you if they're HIPAA compliant. So one way that you can get Zoom for free is to go through a company called Regroup Connect. I think it's regroup.connect. I haven't used them personally, but I know a lot of people who have. I think it's like regroup/connect. And they have a version of Zoom that my understanding is HIPAA compliant, and they offer a BAA, and it's free. Don't hold me to this, y'all. I don't know what's true 5 minutes from now in the telehealth world. Things are always changing, but I think that's true. Then you're also going to want to get email. that is HIPAA compliant. And kind of the gold standard there is probably Hush Mail, maybe Proton Mail. I'm trying to think if there are any others off the top of my head. Those are the two that come to mind first. And you're going to want to have a method of receiving payment that is secure. And so if you're piecemealing together, you might choose to use Square Up. Ivy Pay is another option. I know that there's another really commonly used one, but I'm forgetting what it is. But again, remember that you need to get the BAA with it. And I want to give you a caveat about some of these pieces of software. So your practice is not HIPAA compliant just because you have bought products that are HIPAA compliant. HIPAA compliance is a process. And so here's a good example. With Square Up, they give me, I have used them, they give me a BAA, and that's saying, hey, yo, we keep all your stuff secure. I'm like, great, thank you, I appreciate that. But I have to make choices about how I use it, and if I make certain choices, I have made it not secure. So here's an example of that. HIPAA is meant to protect electronic communication and to not put our clients at risk because we choose the convenience of electronic communication of protected health information, like their name and any related health stuff. The fact that they're in therapy is health information. Their email address is identifiable information. You put those two things together and now we have a breach. So HIPAA's like, no breaches, please. And clients began complaining because they're like, listen, I want my freaking medical records and I'm okay with the risk. Send them to me in email. I don't want to have to come by the office. Things like that. So HIPAA said, okay, we hear you. And we're going to create something called the Omnibus Rule. And that rule covers lots and lots of things. But one of the things that it says is, so long as you are offering to people a HIPAA compliant baseline, they can choose to opt into, listen carefully to that language, opt into features that are not HIPAA compliant. So with my clients, they're set up so that they can pay automatically through my software. So if I'm going to send an invoice or provide a receipt, usually that's going to come through email or text messaging, right? And I can't say that that's the way that I do things as my baseline because that's not HIPAA compliant. However, almost all of my clients would like to get an invoice and a receipt. And so they just check a box on my informed consent and put their initials on there to say, like, I understand the risks. I understand I don't have to do this. I am opting in to do it anyway. So that's what the Omnibus Rule allows us to do, among other things. But please remember that you have to have a way to do all of your practice HIPAA compliantly, and that it is an opt-in, not an opt-out. It's a choice that they're making. And it can't be the only way that you offer to do things for your business to be HIPAA compliant, okay? So we've covered video, we've covered some options for email, we've covered some options for getting payment. Health records, you are able to keep those on your computer if you can keep your computer secure, and you can check out Person-Centered Tech website to know more about exactly how to keep your records secure on your computer. There are ways to keep them secure in the cloud. For example, you could use G Suite, not just your Google Drive, but G Suite, which is an upgrade and comes with a BAA and a workbook with how to make sure that your cloud account is secure. Or you could get a service like Theranest or Simple Practice. iTherapy obviously has all of this stuff bundled together, so you don't have to make those choices. And most of these electronic health record software systems will allow you to bill through them, so you don't have to have an add-on. And many of them will allow you to bill through your insurance companies as well if you want that. Okay. Those also have a really cool feature. Usually they have a client portal. So you're able to put your paperwork in there and your clients can log in, fill it out, and leave it in the portal for you. So it's never out in the world floating around unsecure. I really like portals for that feature. If you are sending and receiving paperwork but you don't have a portal, you do need to be pretty thoughtful about having a baseline of how you can do that in a HIPAA compliant way. And then if they want an easier option, like for example, if they want to receive it and give it back to you in email, that is an opt-in. because even if your email is HIPAA compliant, it's HIPAA compliant while it's in your email, but it's floating out there in the world. And while it's floating out there in the world to land in their email, it's not necessarily secure unless you have a version that encrypts it and you have a password, blah, blah, blah. That's why you'd want Hushmail. And then when it lands in their email, unless they have a HIPAA compliant email, which most of them won't have, it's not secure once it's there. So there are really kind of three places where it needs to be secure. And that's one reason I really like a portal, because it's secure in all the places. Hushmail does have an opportunity for you to, it's secure while it's in Hushmail. It can be encrypted and password protected so that it lands over there in a secure way. And then if they would like to, if it's important to them, they can also purchase their own version of Hushmail so that when they receive it and it's on their computer, it remains secure. So there are lots of ways to do this. But I imagine as you're listening to all that, you're like, please just give me the package. Like, that's a lot to think about. That's definitely where I landed. And I love that the package that I have uses all of the software I would have picked on my own anyway. So it's a win-win for me. Okay, so we've covered software. There are text messaging products that you can get that are HIPAA compliant as well. There's one called Signal that's free, and your client can get the app on their phone. You can have the app on your phone. You can both also have it on your laptop. And it's so secure that according to Roy at Person-Centered Tech, it doesn't even require a BAA because it's that level secure. So that's an option as well. Again, like, nobody is as careful about your license as you are. So these are all just tips and tricks, but I want you to make sure that you are looking at your licensure requirements, looking at your code of ethics, because remember, they vary so much by profession, and our state laws vary so much, even in the same state by profession. It's crazy. But make sure that you're covering yourself and your clients, okay? Upgraded paperwork, we got that. Liability insurance, we've got that. We've covered the products that you need. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. I don't think that I am. I'll add it in the comments if I have. You might be wondering, do you need specialized training to provide telehealth? I've made a podcast about this. I will link it somewhere in here. I personally think that you should do some training just to make sure that you know what the heck you're doing. But whether you have to or not depends on a few places. So check first with your liability insurance. Do they require you to? And if so, that's going to come in one of two formats. Either they're going to say, like, one of three. We just want to see demonstration that you have done some telehealth education. So that might be through my course, it might be through a CEU course, that might be through a certification program, but they might just leave it open-ended. Another option would be that they say you need a certain number of CEUs and have that documented. Another might say we need to see you having gone through a certification process. My guess is that in the state of coronavirus situation that we're dealing with, that you could probably get a pause on that requirement from your board if you emailed them and explain the situation, but that's just my take. I would email them and find out. Most states do not require certification. Most ethics bodies don't require certification. Most liability insurance don't require certification. If you are paneled with an insurance company, some of them will require certification and through a particular company. And might even require you to use a particular platform to deliver services. So if you're doing this through insurance, then you want to check that out with the insurance company. Okay, so we're going to check with our liability provider. We're going to check if you are paneled by insurance companies and you plan on delivering telehealth and have it billed through insurance. You're going to check with your state board if they require anything. And most of the time, what I'm seeing is that they leave it open and say something like, you know, you need to be competent in all of the services that you provide and can demonstrate your competence. Some of them are requiring a certain number of CEUs. Usually it's a low number. Very few are requiring certification or a high number of CEUs. So liability insurance, insurance if you are paneled, your state board, and your professional code of ethics. So that's the last place, your professional code of ethics. I really think it's important to have community when you're doing something new. And so you are very welcome to join my free Facebook group. It's online therapist group. We answer tons of questions in there and provide support for one another. So it's free. We got you. There are a lot of people in there who've been doing telehealth for a long time and can provide you any support that you need, okay? So you don't have to be out there all by yourself trying to figure this out. I know I just gave you a lot of information pretty quickly. I just want to give you a few clinical tips and then I'm going to wrap up. And know that you can always reach out and I'll give you as much information as I can, okay? So tip number one, you want to be making eye contact with your client. And as therapists, we get a lot of information from the cues on our clients' faces, right? So what I don't want you to do is stare at the camera. So this is me looking at myself in the video as I'm filming it. And it should look to you like I'm looking you pretty close in the eye. This is me looking at the camera. It should look weird. It should look like I'm not looking at you anymore. So what I like to do when I have my clients in session is instead of having the screen full size out to the edges, I minimize it so that it's, I don't know, like 2/3 the side of the screen, and I push it up underneath the video button, the video camera. And that way, when I look them in the eyes, it just happens to be the sweet spot that looks like I'm looking them in the eyes. And so I can read all of their cues and they can do the same with me. And I coach them in the early sessions to do this so that we're making eye contact. And let me tell you, it makes a huge difference in the clinical work, like a huge difference. And they may not be used to that if they've been Skyping or FaceTiming or whatever with friends and family. So I do make sure I train them on like, hey, this is super important. We really want to make sure that we're doing this. And if it feels like I'm not looking at you, you need to tell me so that we can fix that up. So eye contact really, really matters. Most states will want you to know the physical address, and I just think it's a good idea to know the physical address where your client is at the time of service, so that if they go into like a medical emergency or psychological emergency, you can get them help to where they are. And so with all of my clients, I get the address where they're going to be doing therapy, and you guys will start to notice like it's the same background, they're at the same place. You won't need to ask every single time, but you want to know where the heck they are, and if it looks different in the background, to make sure that you have the new address. If they happen to be in their car doing therapy, you can just have them go on Google Maps, hold the button down for where they are, and then share that location with you via your HIPAA compliant phone. They can just text it to you, and then you'll know exactly where they are, even if they don't know the address. So really good eye contact, making sure you know where they are in case of an emergency. And then there are some things about, you know, the less nervous you are, the less awkward it's going to feel for them. So practice with a friend or two before you start providing sessions to someone, because it can just feel really awkward the first few times. And the more you can normalize, like, listen, we're going to get disrupted sometimes. Like, I'm going to hear your kid in the other room. You might hear my dog bark. Just like if we were in an office together, and sometimes you're going to be able to hear the therapy client next door crying, or sometimes you're going to hear somebody in the break room laughing really loudly. It's the same thing. So it might feel weird because we're doing telehealth and that feels novel, but those kinds of distractions are pretty normal no matter where we happen to be. And I usually will tell them the story about having worked in a counseling center and we constantly had fire alarms going off. I'm like, listen, nothing that can happen at your house or my house is going to be as distracting as that was. The other thing is that because it's online for some people, because they're used to Skyping or FaceTiming with their friends, it can feel naturally more casual to them. And so I often will set the frame in the first session or two about that. And I'll say, like, sometimes what we find with telehealth is that people are able to go deeper and faster because they are in their comfort place. They're in their home. They've got their favorite blanket with them. They've got their own box of tissues. You know, maybe they've journaled just before, can journal after. There are a lot of benefits to you being in your own space. But also sometimes it's so comfortable that we forget some things. So just as a reminder, therapy is a sacred space. We don't bring glasses of wine or other alcohol into session. We don't bring other people into session. Like, it needs to be a private place, and we need to make sure that you're going to be able to block out this time so that you're not interrupted. So if you've got kids at home, that somebody else is taking care of them, all of that good stuff, because this is an important time and we want to protect it. That's worked just fine. I think a lot of the fears that people have about telehealth, when you really think them through, don't make any sense. So if your head is like, but what would I do if they're lying about their location? I just want you to think for a minute about, in a physical practice, when you get your client's address, how often does it go through your head of, is this the real address? Maybe it's not. It doesn't. Same with your online practice. It would be really odd for somebody to give you the wrong address, right? Like, we don't go to our clients' houses and confirm that that's their address. We don't get on Google Maps and confirm, oh yeah, that's their car, I saw it in the parking lot. So some of the things that we're afraid of, if you just think for a minute of like, okay, what's a correlate in my in-person practice? And does this fear really make sense when I compare the two? I think you're gonna feel a lot better. The same thing comes up around like, what if a crisis happens? What if my client becomes suicidal or at risk for hurting somebody else? And I would say, well, okay, so what would you do in your physical practice? And when people give me the steps that they would take in their physical practice, they never, ever include tackling the client. They never include grabbing the client and restraining them. So there's nothing extra that you'll be doing online that you would not be doing in person. Like, we're not going to physically restrain our clients. So even though it feels different, think through the steps and then think through like, okay, well, yeah, that would be exactly what I would do online. Huh. And if there's anything a little different, then you just need to think through what to do. So for example, I worked at a university counseling center, and part of our crisis response was to use the local mobile crisis response unit if somebody called us after hours in emergency. Not every county has one of those. So if I have a client that's in a different county, I just need to think through, okay, so what does that county have and how would we use that? And I think that through in the very beginning, and I talk with the client about it in the very first session. So we just have a plan together. And then if drama happens, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's just kind of thinking that stuff through. And if you hit some roadblocks, we have hit them too. So you can just come on in and ask us on the online therapist group, and we will help you. We'll help you work it through. It's a really great group of people, super helpful, super generous. If you have questions that I'm not addressing here, I think I'm going to put this maybe on YouTube and maybe on my Facebook page. Just drop questions over there. I'm happy to answer them for you. I also have a Get It Going checklist that has all of these things in there, as well as links to some of the harder to find information. So if you're like, I don't know where the heck my legal codes are for my state, we've got links to most of that in the Get It Going checklist. And that's a free checklist. If you're like, what software did you say again? We've got all of that in the checklist as well. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I know that y'all are probably super stressed about the idea that you might be moving into telehealth during this phase of, I don't want to call it a crisis because I'm not going to feed into that kind of energy during this opportunity for us to learn a new way of connecting and supporting our people. I hope this was helpful, you guys. Please let me know if you have any other questions. Have a really great day.